Keep in mind, I'm not somebody who's getting a lot of shoes thrown at them. Shoe companies are not just throwing shoes at me to review. I also don't have a large pile of cash kicking around where I can just increase my shoe rotation as much as I want. So I have to really pay close attention to the specs of the shoe, what other reviewers are saying, trying them on in the store, taking them for a little bit of a test run before I make that decision. And I can tell you that I feel like,
yeah, I just wanna be great. Yeah, I just wanna be great. Yeah, I just wanna be great. Yeah, yeah, I just wanna be.
Hi everybody and welcome to today's video. My name is Matt and yes, today I want to talk to you about the Saucony Ride 15. Now there are 4 things that I want to cover off in this video. First off, I want to go over just a couple of the specs. We won't spend too much time there. I'll put a link in the description down below if you want to see more detail on those specs. Secondly, I just want to talk to you about why I bought this shoe. Where does it fit in my shoe rotation? Third, just go over some of my likes and dislikes that I've had running in this shoe so far. And lastly, do I feel like I made the right choice? Was the Saucony Ride 15 worth my hard-earned cash? All right, to start off, let's cover some of the specs for this shoe. Now, Saucony has always kind of fit the Ride into the daily trainer category. It comes in at 249 grams. I'll put the ounces up here on the screen for a men's size 9. Mine's a size 13. We'll get into that weight a little bit later. The upper for this, if you are familiar with Saucony over the last couple of years, you will be familiar with this upper. It's an engineered mesh upper, very breathable, very, very comfortable. Around the heel here, there just seems to be the right amount of padding for me. When you're looking at the tongue, again, right amount of padding for me. When I say for me, I'm definitely talking daily trainer. Not too much, not too little. One of the secrets or one of the best parts to a daily trainer for me is that that upper just kind of disappears on your foot. So I want it to be soft, I want it to be breathable, but I want it to disappear when I'm running. I don't want to be thinking about the upper, and they accomplish that with this shoe. They also have a semi-gusted tongue to keep the tongue from running around. Also, there are these little tabs. Now, these tabs are very interesting for me. They're what actually pull the shoe when you're lacing the shoe. They've added these little tabs. Now, that does pull the shoe together and it does make the shoe feel a little bit snugger when you're lacing up. Does that help with the lockdown when you're actually out on a run? I really don't know, because honestly for me, I've always had really good luck with the lockdown with the Sauconys that I've tried over the last couple of years. So does it actually help? My foot's not moving around very much in this shoe, but it wasn't moving around in previous Saucony shoes either, so maybe. But if we move down onto the midsole, again, if you're familiar with Saucony over the last few years, especially if you're familiar with the Saucony Ride series, they've included the Power Run foam in this midsole, which we've seen in previous rides. Now they have stated that it's a little bit lighter, a little bit softer, a little bit more energy return with this midsole, and the shoe is overall lighter, but that's probably for a couple of different reasons. I did find it slightly softer than the Ride 14. Not a lot though, it still has a lot of those same characteristics if you're familiar with the Ride series from the past, but you do get a decent healthy amount of that midsole, and there is an 8mm drop from heel to toe. If we flip that shoe over and look at the outsole, you will see, again, compared to previous Ride versions, there is less rubber than there was in the past on this shoe. However, I will say that where the rubber is, of course, it's always in the right spot with Saucony and the other shoes I've had. That's never been a problem. But also, what I didn't see in some of the reviews and some of the videos until I got this shoe in hand, just how thick that rubber was that was there. There's actually a decent amount of it. Obviously, overall, there's less rubber on this outsole than there was on previous Saucony Ride versions. So you're going to have to make a choice on whether having more rubber, maybe a little bit more durability, is important to you. We'll talk about that in my likes and dislikes. And the one thing I didn't mention when I was talking about the midsole that I'll mention here is they did include this insole. Now this is made up of Power Run Plus, which is a little bit more premium than what you find on the midsole of the shoe in terms of foam. I've been running a lot of my miles in the Triumph 19, which its entire midsole is made up of this Power Run Plus. Now, does that make a difference when I'm out on a run with this shoe? Well, it's not a lot of that material, so I do notice it definitely when I step into this shoe. Doesn't make a difference when I'm out on the run in terms of comfort. I do find this slightly more comfortable than the 14, but I don't know if it's that insole. I find when I'm walking, once I actually start running, it kind of just disappears below my foot. So I don't think it makes a huge difference, but it certainly probably makes it a little bit more comfortable. So good job, Saucony, in including that as an insole of this shoe. I think you might want to put that in more of your shoes in the future. All right, so now that we've talked about some of the specs for this shoe, let's move right into why I bought this shoe. Where does it fit in my shoe rotation? Well, I have just completed running a marathon, and throughout most of my training, I use the Triumph 19 from Saucony, and I also use the Saucony Endorphin Speed. The Triumph 19 max cushion shoe that I used for all those long runs, a lot of those easy runs, even a lot of my just day-to-day miles that I put in that shoe. Whenever I needed to up tempo, whenever I needed to run faster, whenever I knew I was going to be running at faster paces, including on race day, I put on the Endorphin Speed. So I had a 2 shoe rotation for that last marathon prep, including that marathon when I ran in the Endorphin Speed. But for this prep, I knew that I wanted to fit something right in the middle. I wanted to get myself a daily trainer. I wanted something that I felt I could run longer miles on, but I also felt I could use as a little bit of a tweener. Could I up the paces in that shoe? Could I use it for tempo? Could I use it for easy runs? Could I use it for long runs? Could it be a little bit of a tweener? Could it do a number of different things for me? And I think, but we'll go over this, that I may have found that in the Ride 15. So now we get to the fun part of this video where I get to talk about some of my likes and dislikes that I've had in this shoe, starting with the likes. Now the first like I want to talk about with the Ride 15 is actually the weight of this shoe. Now I say this shoe comes at 249 grams for a men's size 9 as listed on their website. I have a size 13 which comes in at 302 grams when I weigh it out. Now that may sound kind of heavy, but keep in mind this is a daily trainer, and when I was in search of a new daily trainer, weight is very, very important to me because I do have a foot slightly on the larger size, so I'm always noticing the extra weight that I carry around in my running shoes. But when I look at the Ride 15 versus what other companies are offering, like the Asics Cumulus 24 or the Brooks Ghost 14 or even the New Balance 880 V12, the Saucony Ride 15 comes on the lighter end of most of those shoes. So that was a big plus with the Saucony shoes because, again, I want to use the shoes for a number of different purposes, and I find with a heavier shoe, it's just a little harder to pick up the paces and slow them down and have it feel like a good solid shoe that you can do all that with. The weight is not a problem with the Ride 15. Now the second like I have for the Ride 15 is actually the comfort of the shoe. When I say comfort, I'm not talking about that midsole. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a couple minutes, but I am talking about the upper for this shoe. One of the things that has me coming back to Saucony time and time again, and I mentioned it earlier on in this video, is this upper is very breathable and it kind of disappears on me while I'm running. I don't even notice that it's there. It's keeping my foot snug, it's doing its job, it's not a problem at all. And in the Ride 15, it does exactly that. So one of the things I really like about this shoe, Saucony keeps pumping out pretty awesome uppers that just seem to work, just seem to fit my foot very, very well. The third like I have for this shoe is actually the firmness of that midsole. Now I know I keep mentioning that that's going to be one of my dislikes, but hear me out. The reason why I like the firmness of the midsole in this, what I consider to be a little bit of a tweener shoe, is that when my legs are getting tired, when I'm running a little bit more sloppy, this is far more stable than some of the shoes that have a lot more squish in their midsole. It's not a stability shoe, it is a daily trainer and it is a neutral daily trainer, but I find that the firmness of that midsole allows it to be pretty stable all the way through my foot strike, all the way through my gait cycle. And I also find that because of that firmness, regardless of what pace I'm going at, whether I want to pick up the paces, slow them down, doesn't really matter. I get the same sort of response from this shoe regardless of the pace. Now, of course, if I'm trying to go really fast or really slow on the extreme end of things, that's where it's going to be a little bit different. But for the most part, regardless of what the pace is, I get a similar return from this shoe, and it really does make it very consistent and stable to run in. We've talked about some of my likes. Let's move on to a couple of my dislikes that I have for the Ride 15. First off, let me say I'm being a little bit nitpicky with these because I was just trying to find a couple of things that I wanted to talk about that you might want to consider as negatives when running in this shoe. And the first one does come back to the firmness of that midsole. I know I talk a lot about it being a solid thing or a good thing that it's that firm, but you have to consider what you have and what you're running with currently, what your rotation is. If you don't have something to fall back on like the Triumph 19 or something that's a little bit more soft, a little bit more max cushion, you might want to consider how many miles you're going to be running in this shoe. As I get further on into my next prep, I've got another marathon coming up in the late fall. I can already feel after just running an entire week in this shoe that my legs do start to get a little bit more tired. It's a little bit less forgiving. Still has a decent slab of midsole, so it does protect your feet, protects your legs, protects your knees, but it does make you a little bit more tired with the impact, with the firmness, with just how stiff this midsole is. So it's something to keep in mind if this were your only option. If this were my only option, I might opt for something like the New Balance 880 V12, something like even the Nimbus 24 from Asics, something that's a little bit more soft, a little bit closer to max cushion. Secondly, and again, this is being a little bit nitpicky, but if I'm talking about things that I dislike on this shoe, maybe it's the rubber on the outsole. I mentioned earlier that there is a decrease in rubber between the Ride 14 and the Ride 15. Now, in a lot of ways, that's a good thing because my number one positive for this shoe is that it's light. They were able to shave some weight off of the Ride 15 compared to the 14, but where they shaved some of that weight was in this outsole. Part of the problem with that is that one of the reasons why I like daily trainers so much is that I feel like I can log a lot of miles in them. I'm gonna get a lot of durability out of them. When you compare the Ride 15 to some of those other shoes out there from other companies, there seems to be a little bit less rubber. That's where they save the weight. So you have to consider that. If you're thinking about logging a ton of miles in the Ride 15, I still think it's gonna hold up to a lot of mileage. It's a quality shoe. There is still a decent amount of rubber on that outsole, but I think they've decreased the amount of miles that you're gonna get in this shoe relative to previous Ride versions when they took away some of that rubber. So we're at probably the most important part of this video, and it is to answer the question, do I feel like my hard-earned money was well spent in buying the Saucony Ride 15? Keep in mind, I'm not somebody who's getting a lot of shoes thrown at them. Shoe companies are not just throwing shoes at me to review. I also don't have a large pile of cash kicking around where I can just increase my shoe rotation as much as I want. So I have to really pay close attention to the specs of the shoe, what other reviewers are saying, trying them on in the store, taking them for a little bit of a test run before I make that decision. And I can tell you that I feel like it was the right decision to spend my money on the Ride 15. Now, also keep in mind that there are a couple of things that I did mention that may come back to bite me with this shoe. One of them is the firmness of that midsole. Again, as we get further into this next marathon prep, as the daily miles log up in this shoe, am I going to regret having a shoe that is quite this firm? Will that come back to bite me? And that outsole, relative to previous rides and relative to some of the other daily trainers out there, having the decrease in rubber, having a little bit more exposed midsole, are these shoes going to last quite as long? Probably not, but we'll see. If you want to see more reviews on this, if we want to see how this is going to hold up for me after 300, 400, 500 miles, stick around, subscribe to my channel, hit that bell notification so you get notified every time I put out a new video. My name is Matt. This is What Matters to Matt. And I'll say it again, what matters to me most is my family. I'll see you in the next one.